Welcome back to the virtual classroom for Comp 3077. This is your virtual professor, Mike Sloan. As you know by now from watching the introductory video, I may or may not be your actual professor for this course, but I will be the guy in the videos. Right now, I'm just the voice in the video. I know for the first two videos in week one, you could see me in the lower right corner. So you know I'm a real person. I'm not always going to be doing that. It depends on the format of the video. That way you can't see that I'm wearing the same thing as I was wearing for the other two videos, but it is the same day, so it's not that big of a deal. But I'm here and we are going to complete our third session for week one. Those first two sessions would have conceivably fit into your first hour lecture if you were in the face-to-face section. And now what I'm going to be covering is what you might be doing in your lab. It's going to be a little quicker than how I cover it in lab, because in lab I'm working with the face-to-face students to get their account set up and whatnot. So this will be less than an hour for sure. And we're going to throw in lots of stuff into the week one case, even though it's a beginner case, just some neat tips and tricks. This is a required video. And in this video, we will be completing your week one work. So in week one, you've had 3 videos. Typically, you won't have more than one. Next week, you'll have a couple, because I'll have a separate video on how to handle and manage the SAM quizzing environment and how to use the training to help you through the quiz if you need to. After that, you'll pretty much, unless I throw in some of those optional videos that add a little bit to the content in that week's case, you'll just have the full case demonstration, which gives you the answers to that case portion. And then you go and do the quiz on your own with the answers available in the training. So in this video, we're going to talk about the week one quiz first, which is done on FOL. Remember, this is the only quiz you're not doing in SAM. It's on FanshaweOnline. It's based on a readiness file that I have in the week one content, and we'll get into that, some really basic stuff there. Then we'll get into the case, which is definitely a beginner case. And I know some of you have used Excel before, but even those of you who took that course with the first 3 weeks being Excel, and you think you learned a bunch about Excel, you're going to see stuff today, even in the first case, that you haven't done before, which I think will be fun for you. And a couple quick tips. Always be saving. Don't forget the 1% extra credit. That's if you buy your SAM key code. And that's a SAM key code reminder that if you set up your free account, you will have to eventually get it by the end of week 2. So I'm going to show you that really quick, the 1% extra credit thing. Okay, so let's navigate over to the browser here. In FOL, we're in content. I'm going to go to the weekly modules. This is what you're going to want to do every week. Every week, you're going to want to come in and check out the available content for that week. Typically, once we get into week 2, it'll be a little shorter. You can see it's just the resource, instruction and resource file. When we get to test week, and always before test week, I have a little survey if you want to do it, and then I provide the test information. There's a bunch of stuff this week. We've already set up our SAM account. Okay, we've gone through a lot of the stuff in the instructions and resource file in terms of talking about MOS. We did that in the introductory video. We've gone to SAM, the institution keys there again. Remember how I talked about that's all over the place. There's links to the virtual classroom, which you obviously found if you're watching this video. So there's a lot more information in week one than you would usually have. Couple quick things now that we're doing our first case. Change your system language to English US. It's really easy to do. It will ensure that you don't run into any issues. I think I've picked cases that will avoid you running into any issues if you're working at home and you don't have those settings. But if you go ahead and do that, you're not going to run into any issues at all. And then there's the 1% extra credit thing like I was talking about, which is in submissions. So if you do already have your key code, get it in before the end of week 2 and you'll get 1% extra credit. So back to the week 1 content, you may have noticed that a little bit down after where I talk about what we're doing in the course in week 1 and then all the stuff we do in the week 1 case, there'll always be a list of what you're doing in the case there. That's your list of the stuff we're doing in week 1. You probably know that stuff, but I'm going to show it to you maybe in a different way and we'll learn some neat stuff. There is a readiness file right here. And right above it was a link to the first quiz. So the readiness file, I'm going to ask you to pause your video and kind of quickly peruse this. In a nutshell, I'm making sure that you guys actually know how to use a computer, because at this point in your academic career at Fanshawe College, that is the expectation. And I have had people come into this class that couldn't even use a mouse, and I was like, hey, you know, we'll figure it out, and we did. So once we get past that, I want to make a point about file management, because every week, as you already learned in the SAM setup video, you're going to download a file in Excel, you're going to rename it, you're going to have to know where it is, you're going to have to go and grab that same file. You don't want to be having two versions of the file and extra files floating around. You need to pay attention to your file management. This is that stuff that you learned in elementary school with computers, and it does come into play in the business world. Files are saved in folders and organized in massive databases of stuff. And if you don't know where your files are, it's not a good scene. And smartphones have made us very bad at this. So this course is going to help you kind of brush those skills up a little bit. Brush them off, I should say. Get them back up to par. So once we know that you're comfortable with that, then we get into Excel, and we're going to open Excel for the first time, and we're going to explore the workspace. So we can do that right now, actually. Easiest way to do that in Windows 10 or on a Mac is just to search for it. Previous versions of Windows, they had everything kind of like tiered down in menus, and you could just find it. It's easier just to search for it. So if you don't have a file already downloaded that is an Excel file, in which case you can just double click on it to open it, you would just search for Excel in the Windows search box, or on your Mac, same thing. I think it's up in the left still or the right, depends on your Mac settings. And you're going to open up Excel. Now, this is assuming that you have downloaded a proper version of Microsoft Office on your computer. So while Excel is taking its sweet time opening there, I don't know what's taking so long, I want to remind you once again that if you go back to the, and we should throw that into our notes, so when I pull this up at the end, it's in there as well. Make sure your MS Office is, type, Michael, up to date. You know, I'm switching back and forth like that so quickly. Alt-Tab. It's a good keyboard shortcut. We're going to talk about that quickly here too. So if you go back to table of contents, getting started, and I talked about this in the course introductory video. I don't need to harp on it again, but I would like to point it out that in the getting started section, under the required software and resources, the first thing I talk about, especially if you're working at home, if you're not just watching these videos from the face-to-face section, you're going to need MS Office 2019 or better. So MS Office 2019, the most updated version of Office 365, or 2021 if you're that far ahead. By the time you might be watching these videos a couple years after I'm done with them, it might already be to 2023, but we usually stick with the versions we have at Fanshawe for at least a couple years, and we just upgraded to 2019, so we'll be on that for a while. So here, you can go here, click on Office 365 for education. Why has the internet connection all of a sudden slowed down here? I'm on campus pretty late here, getting this week one stuff done. Office 365, read the instructions, set up an Office.com account. Please download and install the applications on your machine. Do not just jump into the cloud version and think you're going to submit that in this course. That's not how it works in most Office settings either. That's cool that Microsoft has a cloud version now, but we're not really seeing that as the best option. So we're still using the installed apps. So just a reminder on that too. And we're going to go back into the Readiness file here. So with Excel also open, I'm going to start a blank workbook. As we're opening it up, just right off the top here at the very beginning, take note of the plethora of options you have here in terms of templates. Like let's say you needed to make an invoice for your car washing business that you're doing on the side, or your dog grooming business. You just search invoices and you'll get all kinds of options that come up here, especially with Office 365, like tons of stuff. And as soon as you learn even just the very basics in Excel, look at all these different categories of templates there are. You don't have to make all this stuff from scratch, guys. You can make it look like you did in front of your boss, but it's all there waiting for you. So once you learn the basics, you can take advantage of a lot of that stuff. Right now, we're just going to create a blank workbook, and we're going to talk about the workspace here. And let's say one of the first things we're going to do is put some information in a file, and then We're going to save the file. So this will operate very similar to other Microsoft apps. In fact, a lot of the stuff on the ribbon in general is going to be very familiar to you because certain things in the ribbon like save, undo, redo, file, save as, which I'm going to do right now. This is the same as Word or PowerPoint, other Microsoft apps that you've been using. So I'm going to throw this on the desktop maybe. Oh. Come on, computer. Oh, I am uploading another video. Maybe that's still moving pretty fast considering. You do need a well-oiled, that's not really the right word for a computer, but you need an operational machine in decent shape that isn't that old for this course. Test file. So I've now saved a file as, I put it in a place. I put some stuff in a cell. Let's say I wanted to put some stuff in another cell. Mike was here too. Now, right away, I'm looking at this going, wait a minute. What happened to the content I had in the rest of that cell? And then when I click on it, I can see that it's still there. I just can't see it on the screen. So a lot of this really basic stuff, for many of you, I'm going to assume was already taught to you, but I'm going to revisit these basics just to make sure it's not too rusty. So as you probably do know, if you hover over the border in between a column or a row, you can stretch it out with your mouse. You can also go into format and change column width, row height, all that kind of stuff. You could see that stuff is still there. So my entering stuff into a cell is for a purpose. I want to show you that basically a cell in itself, each of these little boxes, those are all called cells, is like an entire page in Microsoft Word. And that's the brilliance of Excel, is that you have all these different boxes that you can place pieces of data into and then organize them in different ways. If you did want to have like a whole paragraph or some writing in Excel, that would be better done with a text box, which I think you can go to the insert menu here. No, that's more insert cells and rows and stuff. I know better than that. Over here, text box. You'll also notice sometimes you'll see things on my menu with my better resolution, maybe worse resolution, depends on the computer and what we're comparing it to. If I move the window down, you could see that it consolidates menus in the ribbon for you automatically. I'm just giving you a tour of the workspace and showing you little things to watch out for. So the reason I'm doing that also is because part of your first quiz is to address my question in terms of what all these things are on the workspace. And I already had a student email me and say, hey, Mike, what the heck? Now, my previous video, which is still posted as I'm redoing this one, would get you through the case the same way. And this is going to be the updated one. I do identify most of these things in the video, but I didn't identify them here, and they were kind of annoyed by that. So I'm going to show you. Okay, we don't need to see that yet. I'm going to show you guys what you can do. If I want to know what this is, for example, what's that box with A1 in it? And I just stick my mouse over it. It comes up in Excel with a little dialog thing that shows me what it's called. That's the name box. A lot of people don't know that. The name box is a very important thing. You can go into the name box. Let's say I need to go to H72. Type it in, you're there. Let's say I needed to highlight a range, and I'm not very good at using my mouse, and I wanted to put the range right in there. And a range is from one cell to another. So let's say I wanted to go from D4 to J20. Okay, in between the two cell references, I would put a colon, and that would allow me to set up a range. And if I type it in the name box and hit enter, it will highlight the range for me. I don't even have to go and do it with my mouse. There's always like 5 ways to do everything in Excel. As I'm doing this, you're probably, if you're really rusty in Excel, you're probably wondering like, wait a minute, A4, what the heck is A4? You always name the column letter first and the row number after. It's just like using graph paper. You're just going to, it's like a map when you go and navigate around in a map. That's how the spreadsheet works. couple things that you won't get just by hovering over stuff. An Excel spreadsheet in Excel is called a worksheet. A collection of worksheets into a file, which you can have unlimited amounts. I think you can only make a file with one execution with up to 255 worksheets at once. But I just learned recently you can just keep making more and more and filling them up with data pretty much until your computer can't save the size of the file anymore. It is pretty interesting. Actually, we could look that up really quickly. Because it only used to be, and I just looked it up, see? It's in my autocomplete there. 255 sheets, right? So you can create a workbook with 255 sheets, but once you've created it, check this out. Excel doesn't limit how many you can actually make. A lot of people don't know this. I used Excel for a long time. I didn't know that till a few months ago. I just realized that. So 255 is the standard number. I think they use a similar number for how many queries you can have in an if statement. We'll get to that stuff later. Don't worry. Don't worry about that right now. So this is a worksheet. A bunch of worksheets together are a workbook. Excel used to start with 3 worksheets. If you want extra worksheets, you can hit the Add Sheet button. It's the New Sheet button. See, if I hover over it, it tells me what it is. What's this? That's the zoom area. So you can make it smaller, make it bigger. Page break preview, scroller, sheet tab. You can actually change the colors of sheet tabs. It's kind of cool. People don't know you can do that. You can do different colors. You could do, actually, I think you could do gradients. No, that's getting pretty fancy. I don't generally do much of that, but I should more. I mean, the sheet tabs, in a sense, are like a filing cabinet, and you can create as many sheets as you want here. Most new workbooks, when you created a new file in Excel, a blank workbook, used to come with 3 sheets. It was determined after much market research that most people didn't use that many sheets, so they just now make it 1 sheet. This is a row. This is a column. What else in that workspace anatomy might we not have covered? Wait, how did I get off the readiness file? Oh, it's already there. So 15 would be workbook, new sheet, sheet tab, row number, cell, name box, column letter. Those are obviously menus. They'll pull up a new ribbon. File name, help menu, which they're always trying to make it more like a Mac, right? Like instead of just saying help, it says, tell us what you can do. And Macs are trying to do things that are more like Microsoft, believe it or not. So you're going to get all this stuff. This one is important. So I will make a reference to the formula bar quite often when I'm doing stuff in here, and that's what this is. This is the formula bar. Okay, so in addition to just generally knowing the anatomy of the Excel workspace, I'm also going to encourage you guys to start using keyboard shortcuts again, particularly Control S, which is the keyboard shortcut for save. And they're not always that obvious. I mean, Control V, which is paste. I don't know why it's not Control P. Well, Control P is print. And these obviously start with a command if you're on a Mac. So I'm going to close that file up. We're going to start the case now. How far in did we get there for that? Oh, that's 20 minutes. Wow. So yeah, this will be set up in chapters. So if you want to skip the readiness section of the video and jump right to the case, you will be able to do that. And it's not going to be a full 20 minutes because I had a little blip that I got to take out in the middle there. So once you're done kind of reviewing the workspace and keyboard shortcuts, I mean, guys, this is open book, open resource, the FOL quiz. You can Google the keyboard shortcuts while you're taking it. What the quiz consists of, and here's a ton of keyboard shortcuts you probably never knew even existed, but they're just insane. What the quiz consists of is 2 primary questions, one of which asks you to match all of these numbers up with the thing it actually is, and then the other to match up 5 basic keyboard shortcuts. It's a mindless quiz. There's links to it here. You just have to go to FOL quizzes and get it done before the end of week 1. You'll be good to go. Right there. Okay. So let's get into the first case and get it done. Shouldn't take us too long. It's a pretty basic case. I'm going to show you some cool tips along the way. Keep in mind when I do these recorded videos, I'm always going a bit faster than I would generally go in lecture. And the reason for that, and this is one of those things I like to talk about in week 1 as well, is because you can pause and play back and use a YouTube video to your advantage. Pause, rewind, move ahead, use chapters. Okay, so they're going to be set up this way so that they're very user-friendly, including this one. Generally, I don't remember all these things in the middle of doing a video, but I have taught this course. This will be my 3rd fully online pre-recorded set of videos, so I'm always thinking of more stuff as I'm doing it. So let's get into SAM and get the case done. So now that we have the FOL quiz done, and if you do your extra credit for buying the SAM key code early in the FOL submission box, pretty much everything else in the entire course until week 13 is going to be done on SAM. So you go to SAM and you log in with that username and password you came up with when you set up your SAM account. Hopefully you still have that. If you don't have your key code yet, it's likely going to prompt you to put the key code in, and you can tell it, no, I'm good. I'll get it in there in time. I'll enter it later, and it'll just take you right to your activity list every week. So once you put your key code in, you'll be past that point. So we are going to do the week 1 case. I kind of got started on this with you in the SAM setup video. So I gave you kind of a breakdown of how all the stuff sits there in SAM in the activity list and how you can turn the submission in twice and all that stuff. So the FOL quiz you can only do once, but everything in SAM, you can do all your case files 2 times. So if you submit it once, you don't get 100, you can do it again for the 100. And then for the SAM quizzes that start next week in week 2, you can do those as many times as you want until you get a 70%. And the 70 is all you need to get the full pass. All of this just has to be done by the weekly deadline, which is Sunday night. So the first thing you do when you get into the SAM case, like basically the, what do we call this? Interface. The SAM case interface here. You're going to download the instructions. My browser is prompting me, where do I want to put these files? Most of you probably haven't gone into your browser settings and changed that, in which case it will very typically go to downloads. That's where everything goes if you just save it. Okay, it just goes to downloads. I'm putting it on my desktop, so it's a little easier to manage in the context of this demonstration. If you're using Chrome, as you were instructed to do at the beginning of the course in the course introduction, you can go down here and bring the folder right up, or you can open the file right up. Now, I wouldn't open the Excel file yet. Open up the instructions, and this is the process every week. There's an instruction file, and there's a case file. Sometimes you will see additional files in there, like support files. Okay, and this is not one of those cases. But the beginning of every case, we'll start with instructions. Notice how that enable editing thing comes up. You just click enable editing to get rid of it. It's standard security stuff when you download from the web. So you're going to have to do the same thing with the Excel file. It always tells you to open it up and save as. I disagree with that. I think you should just rename the file that you downloaded, and then you only have one version of it. Stop downloading a bunch of versions and trying to figure out where they are. Pay attention to your file management. You need one file. You download the file. I know I put that file on the desktop, so I have a shortcut to the File Explorer on my taskbar. You may not have that in Windows or on your Mac, in which case you can right-click on the Windows icon and go to File Explorer from there. Mac users, I'm sure you know how to go find your files. So what you want to do then is get to the folder where your file is and rename it before you even open it. So I put mine on my desktop, and I'm going to, you can kind of do like you can click and then click again, like about 2 seconds later, and it will get you into the file to rename it, into the file name. Or you can just right click or command click on a Mac, and you can get into rename that way. And all you have to do every week is change the 1 to a 2. Do not mess with anything else in the file name. Pay attention to what the file name is. In case you've downloaded it more than once, sometimes it adds extra stuff in there in parentheses and says copy of. if the file name isn't exactly as it should be, it will not get uploaded by Sam. And that's also very easy to fix. So I'm going to add something in there right now. And that would be a common thing that Windows might do, what I just added in there if you downloaded the file more than once and then deleted the other version. And I'm leaving that in there, so when I go to upload it, it's not going to work. I'm doing that on purpose to show you how easy it is to fix. But any other week, you would not do something like I just did. You literally change the 1 to a 2. That's it. And then you just leave it. And then when you go to submit it, it'll be ready to go. Another note, and they even make a note about this at the beginning of the cases, that you may not have the settings on your computer that show you the .xlsx. That doesn't mean that it's not an Excel file. If you see the icon, don't worry if you can't see the .xlsx. That's just how your computer, your global settings are set up. You do not go and type it in because you think the file name is wrong. I have a lot of students that end up having their file set up as .xlsx. All you do every week is change the number 1 to a 2. Now, I have gone ahead this week and added in this nonsense here so that when I go to submit it, I'm going to show you how easy that is to fix. Once you rename the file, you open it up and you have the instructions on one side, you got the file on the other. If you happen to have 2 monitors, that makes it really nice in this course to do it that way. You could also print these out. I'll be bouncing back and forth using Alt-Tab, which is a great keyboard shortcut. So once the file's open, wow, take your time, Excel, come on. Once the file's open up here, I'm going to click Enable Editing. And I'm going to bounce back and forth. See that? Alt-Tab. So a quick note on how these files work. Somewhere in these files, there is some sort of code set up so that they know not only if you got a file from another SAM account, but also if you've copy and pasted from another computer from another file in your class, like in one of your classmates' files. I don't have a problem with you guys helping each other out, but do not share files, okay? I make this course easy enough by literally showing you how to do every single thing on every case, and the training shows you how to do everything on every quiz, so you don't need to borrow each other's work. You can help each other, just do your own work, do your own files, all right? When you get a SAM start file, it will always have a documentation sheet. You should always make sure your name is in there. You don't want to accidentally be in another student's account. And then typically you will go to a later worksheet in the workbook. This one only has one worksheet. So you already know you're going to go there. As long as you checked your name was there, you can go right to it. And the first instruction says, she's a sales rep at this express buy. She's going to do an analysis on what's selling better than other stuff. So she's doing a profit analysis. So it says, go to the worksheet. We already did that. Enter some text. So this is, the basic gist of the week 1 case. I mean, it is really beginner level, and that's okay because it's getting you caught back up and refreshing your skills in Excel. So let's go and take a look at A1. So A1 is here. And A1, if you look at it, you can see that it's crossing all the way over through a bunch of columns. This means that it's still a single cell, but it's a merged cell. You're going to learn that next week. It's a pretty simple formatting tool, but it wants you to enter text into that cell. So you can type it, but I'm going to encourage you guys right from the get-go, right from the beginning of this class, anything that's longer than like a word, don't type it. Because if you type it and you get a typo, Sam's going to mark it wrong. Sam will mark wrong an extra space, a letter that should be capital that isn't, a letter that's capital that should not be. It will mark wrong a period where it didn't say to put a period. It is a computer. So it's grading you based on the precise way it said to complete something. So I like this because it forces you guys to pay attention to stuff a little more than you usually would. But it also means that whenever you guys all type super fast and you're not, we all are going to get the occasional typo. So if you get something that's a little bit longer and it's got capitals and smalls, just copy it. And when you copy it, try and make sure when you're copying it from Word, you're not picking up extra spaces. And if you do, you can get rid of them when you get over there. Now, typically, I would say, hey, let's go into A1, sit on it, and paste. Paste is a keyboard shortcut that is Control-V. Now, when you have a merged cell, it actually doesn't let you do that. So right from the first step, I'm going to teach you different ways to do things. So I want to copy and paste this. And the other thing it would do is it would bring in the formatting from the Word file if you pasted it right in, and then you'd have to remember to get rid of that formatting if Sam is actually grading that. Here, I'm going to show you, instead of trying to copy it right into the cell without activating the cell, double click in the cell with your mouse and make it active. And you can copy in the cell or the formula bar. In fact, if you were sitting on the cell, you could go right to the formula bar and copy it in. When you copy things into the formula bar, it will never take the formatting. When you copy things into a cell and it's active, like this, when you go active in the cell instead of just pasting right on the cell, it also won't take the formatting. So the formatting that it's picking up is formatting that the SAM publishers already gave you in that cell. Notice how I have no extra spaces at the end, so I'm good. As soon as you get whatever it is you need to get into a cell, hit enter. That is a really good, really strong, best habit that everyone who's using Excel needs to get into their heads. Always hit enter once you're done putting stuff into a cell, because once you start working with formulas, if you're not hitting enter, it will then, if you just click into the next cell and you're in the middle of a formula, it'll just put that into the formula or function. You always want to be hitting enter. For the next one, we can just type it in. Go to cell A2, type in profit analysis. Try and make sure you spell it right. Profit analysis. Enter. Sweet. We're moving pretty fast here. For the next step, clear everything. So here's a step right in the week 1 case. People use Excel for years and don't even know that this is available. And this is one of the reasons I picked this updated week 1 case, is because of this particular step. I love this step because it's something that is very handy. You'll very often get in, and they're talking about this cell right here. You'll get into situations where you need to remove something from a cell and you just click delete on the keyboard. And then when you arrow down from it, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that bottom border is still there. And when I go there, it still says, heading to cell style. Notice up in the top here, these cell styles. We'll do some of those next week. The proper way to do this, if you want everything removed, is to go into this clear menu and see what your options are. You can clear comments, which are little things that are attached to a cell that give you a description. You can clear just hyperlinks and leave the text. You can clear the contents and leave the formatting. You can clear the formats and leave the contents. Or you can clear all. So here, watch clear formats. See, it leaves the text, but it clears all the formats. This particular step, I just hit Control Z on my keyboard, by the way. That's undo, because I was just showing you an example. This particular step wants you to clear everything. I'm doing hand quotes right now. You can't see me because I'm not doing the me in the video thing right now, but that would be clear all. So that is the proper way to complete step 3. Clear all. In cell A3, change the text 2017 to 2019. So I'm going to go to A3. Easiest way to get in there and start messing with that is to double click. Now, I saw people going in here and saying, well, it's not there. That's just text that's in cell A3 that's spilling over those cells. You'll know what's there when you click in the formula bar. When you click and look up at the formula bar. So I'm going to do this in the formula bar. It's nice and easy that way. Just change the 7 to a 9, hit enter, you're done. Yes, the week 1 case is kind of easy. In cell D9, enter a number, 48,050. Done. That was easy. I hit enter when I was done. Now, the fill handle. This was in our 90s Excel video from YouTube. The fill handle has been around forever. It is the better way to copy and paste a formula. Okay. In this particular case, we do have an Excel function in use right off the bat in the week 1 case. All right. So this is the most common formula that we use. It's to add up a series of cells without having to do this. So obviously, if you've taken Excel before, and even if you haven't, I'm going to teach you this right now. You can use Excel like a calculator anytime you want. All you have to do is use the equal sign in front of it, which allows you to either do math or use an Excel function to do math, or some other type of calculation or search or something like that. Like a lookup function really isn't technically doing math. It's just querying different data sections in a spreadsheet in a workbook. I'm going to type equals, and I'm going to go 7 times 8. You can use the asterisk, right? It's 56. Oh, cool. Equals 2 plus 2 plus 2. Nice. So Excel is a calculator. What if I go equals? Because keep in mind, the magic of Excel is to never have to type in a number more than once. Now that 62,090 is in there for the 2019 calendar profit, you're not going to type that in again. If you want to use that in a math equation or a math problem, you would click on it and use B5, not the number. Or you could type it in. You could type in B5. So if I wanted to add B5, C5, and D5, I could just go B5 plus C5 plus D5. And that actually is the same number Sam already had in there for us. However, Sam is going to mark that wrong because Sam didn't ask to have that in there. Sam had a function in there. Now, using a sum function to add up those three numbers is more efficient. This may not be the best example because there's only three of them, but if you go equals and tell Excel you want to use one of its very handy functions, one of which is sum, it's the most commonly used one, then in parentheses, which Canadians call brackets, and they're not. I'm a web coder, so I don't call those brackets, but if you want to keep calling them brackets, that's fine. In the parentheses, otherwise known as Canadian high school teacher brackets, because they all call them brackets, you would then put your range. Instead of all three things adding up together, you would put B5 to D5 with that colon in between, like we learned in the intro section. And you hit enter and it adds it up. In fact, if you equal sum, you can even just highlight all three of them and it puts the range in there for you and the colon and everything. It types it in. So there's all these different ways to do stuff. You want to do it whichever way you're most comfortable with, but also, sorry, there's some stuff on the desk here in this recording room. Also, whichever way is most efficient. I think picking it up with your mouse is probably the quickest way. In fact, using the AutoSum button, which we're going to use in the next step, is even quicker. What they wanted you to do here was recognize that when you have a function already set up in one place and you have series of numbers that are recurring right below it in the same way, just for a different type of item, you can just copy that through. And you can do this by copying and pasting, but it's even better to use the fill handle, which is that little tiny cube there. There are people that use Excel for years and don't notice that the autofill handle is there. You can also autofill using all these different fill options here, which I very rarely use. The autofill handle is the best way to do it. Now, this is a great opportunity to point out three different behaviors that you can have with a cell when you grab it either inside on the border or right on that corner of the border. So if you grab inside a cell, click with your mouse, start dragging and unclick, you're going to highlight that cell and everything else you dragged over with it. You're highlighting. And if I wanted that all to be filled with yellow, I could do that and it would be done. If you drag right on the border, if you click and drag on the border, anywhere on the border but where that little box is, you're going to move it. Okay? And moving does not automatically change the cell references like copying would. If you drag right from that little tiny cube, that is called the handlebar or the fill handle, that will allow you to copy without having to copy and paste. And when you copy a formula, the magic of Excel is that it knows if this is B5 to D5, it'll change to 6 here, and then 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, there are situations where you don't want that to change, and we'll get to that later. That's called absolute referencing. This is just standard relative cell referencing. Standard referencing is called relative. So the fill handle is essentially just copying what's in there. If I put the word Mike in there and grab the fill handle and drag it down, it's not going to be smart enough to start coming up with a bunch of other names. It just figures you're just copying because that's what it's doing. But when you copy a formula, it knows to change the cell references. Now notice how I did not go all the way down there. The reason I did not go all the way down there is because the Excel step said not to. It said only go to E10. Here's what's funny. In the real world, anytime you have a financial table with a bunch of data like this, where you're running totals along the end, all the way to the right column, and along the bottom in the bottom row, whether you added up all of these numbers together or all of these three numbers together in a total, it will come to the same exact number no matter what. However, because Sam didn't tell you to drag this all the way down to 11, a few people in my face-to-face section already did this, and they couldn't figure out why they got it wrong. Because once you do these totals, that number is going to appear to be correct. The reason this actually matters, or the reason you would even know this, is because I publish the instructions in SAM with the final images at the end. So this is a nice way to go and check to see if your numbers are correct. You can always go now to the bottom and check and look and see what's going on in there. So you can see this is a very easy case, but I'm covering a lot of ins and outs here while I'm doing it. And I'm showing you stuff that you might not even be aware of, like little things like the fact that with a financial table, the far right corner is always going to be the same, whether you total it from the vertical section or the horizontal section. So I stopped those totals at 10, and now I'm going to go into B11 and do a sum function. And it says, use the sum function to calculate the total profit, B5 to B10, copy it over. So they expect you to use the fill handle. They did say copy and paste it. There's so many different ways to do this. So let's start with the sum function itself. You can go equals sum, start parenthesis. You can type in your range directly, or you can highlight your range. And then when you're done, you don't have to put the other parenthesis in there. Once you're done, when you hit enter, hey, what the hell? What did I do there? Equals sum. Oh, I didn't hit enter. I hit something else. B5 to B10, or just highlight it, like I said. Okay, and that was interesting. It just said sum of B5. I'm just making a mess of this. Equals sum. Start your parenthesis. Highlight the range. And I have two equal signs in there. Gonna fix that. Hit enter. That's the obvious way to do it. An easier way to do it, I just deleted that, would be to go and hit AutoSum. AutoSum will automatically detect the most obvious range, pick it up for you, and then you can hit enter. So it's one less step. Now you have to be careful because you might have situations where you have an average and then a total, or a min and a max and then a total. In which case, if you auto-summed here, you'd have to make sure to remove those two cell references so you're only summing up the main stuff. But that's another way to do it. And then you can use the fill handle and copy it over. So let's say you had a situation, and I'm going to delete that again, where you know every sum you're going to do is the same range every time. You can highlight these and hit the auto-sum button, and it'll do them, boom, just like that. I didn't know you could do that till like 5 years ago, and I've been using Excel since 1994. It's a neat trick. One of my students showed it to me. So it's just everything you can do to save that little bit of extra time. So it's pretty cool. So then down here, I think we have to make a text edit there. So we've done 7, A, and B. Now in cell A13, after the word supplies, enter the text. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm not going to pick up any extra spaces. And I'm going to go in here, double click, go up to the formula bar, space, paste that in, enter. I'm going to go a little more quickly now because we're just kind of repeating the same type of steps. Well, here's a different one. Enter the information from the table. Now you could totally type these three in, or you could be blessed with the knowledge from your virtual professor that if you see a table in Microsoft Word and you want to copy cells in the table, like these three cells with the numbers, and I'm going to go Control C, and I go over here and highlight 3 cells and go Control V, it'll paste the numbers right in there. And the reason I'm doing this is more so to show you what I was talking about at the very beginning of the case, where if you take Microsoft Word content and bring it right into Excel and just paste right over the cells without activating them or anything like that, it will take the formatting from Word, in which case it will give you this little dialog box right after it where you can choose to match the destination formatting and not take that formatting on. Now, SAM is not actually checking the formatting of those numbers, only what's in the formula bar. Sometimes it's checking formatting, sometimes it isn't, but it's always checking what's in the formula bar. Excuse me. So that step is done in a nice, quick way. Here's a nice one. That I love the authors of these cases because they could just go, in cell B23, enter a formula that is B19 minus B11. Right? They could just give it to you like that. Instead, they say enter a formula that subtracts B11 from B19. So they're reading it to you not in the order it will appear in the math problem. So a lot of students always go B11 minus B19, but it didn't read like that. It didn't say enter a formula that has B11 subtracting B19, and then it would be in that order. And I think I said it the opposite way at first, just to confuse you even more. What it says is take B11 from B19. Now, this is just a simple math formula, but it still has to start with equals, because anytime you're doing math, so, and you go B19 minus B11. Well, why, Mike? Because B11 is coming from it, so it has to come after it. Hit enter and copy that over. They say copy and paste it this time. You can do it that way this time just for fun. Copy, so Control C in this cell. Highlight the next three and paste. And it's the same as using the fill handle, but to me it takes longer. If I'm going too fast at any point in the video, just stop it and go back again and watch it again. So now we're going to do some other really basic functions that are also very go-to and very commonly used. And instead, we're still not going to go to the formulas tab though. I mean, you could just type these in too, but there are shortcuts for these in the AutoSum menu. So the AutoSum button isn't just a button. If you go over here to the right, you can do auto average, auto count, auto max, auto min. Then you can start going to more functions, which we can get into all that with the formula tab and all the different menus. So they want you to go to H4 and average out D5 to D10. So you could type this equals average. Average is not an abbreviated one. You have to type the whole thing. Start here, D5, D10. Okay. Or you could have gone in here and pulled up average just so you didn't have to type it. And it gives you the parentheses ready to go. And then you can actually highlight. It knew I did that because I did that before. Wow, funny that I remembered that. Cell just keeps getting smarter. And that is how you do an average. Same as sum, same as max and min too. So they want you to do a max in H7 for D15 to D18. So what was the max sales of printing? So H7, we can do auto max. And see what it does here? See, this is why you got to be careful with all the auto choices, because they will pick up the closest obvious range, which doesn't happen to be what you're trying to max. You want to do max for D15 to D18, which is over here. D15 down to 18, not 19. Don't include the total. That'll really make the max look weird. Now, I'm going to do that by actually, you know what? A lot of you might make that mistake. I'm actually going to make that mistake on purpose so that when I submit the case, I have something to fix so I can show you, because it's the first case. I want to show you that. I want to remind you that you can submit it again for a better mark. Hit enter. And that is not the right number. If I scrolled down here and looked at the final figure, I would see that, but I'm going to purposely miss that and move on to the next step. Next step wants me to do a min function in H8 for D5 to D10, which was the first range I used. I could type it almost as fast as I could go here and grab it. Equals min, D5 to D10. It picked up that range by default. Just highlight right over it. Just go grab your mouse and highlight right over it and then hit enter. Always hit enter. Emma wants to identify. So those are done, and I screwed that one up. So 11B. Step number 12. Emma wants to identify which was the most profitable. So copy what's in A16 and paste it in I7. They want no formatting. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. Now, unlike if you copied something from Word, A16, if you copy it and paste it right in there, it doesn't give you the little dialog box that just says match destination formatting because you're already in the destination. It gives you all these different options. The easiest way to copy without formatting is just to paste values. And then it's just exact. If you just paste the values, which text is still a data value inside a cell, it would just keep the formatting that was already there. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to copy it without remembering to paste values, because you see all these paste options here. It's pretty cool. There's other ways to do this, okay? And because as soon as I go and type something in another cell, that little autocomplete box is gone. And I had a student in my face-to-face section that, oh, now I can't fix it. Well, come on, of course you can fix it. You've used this tool in Microsoft Word. How could I make this look like the formatting of the rest of the cells around it? Sit on one of the other cells, click the Format Painter brush, paint over it. That also matches that formatting or doesn't take on the other formatting. Trick with the Format Painter brush, by the way, if you want to keep painting things with it, you can double click on it. And then when you're done painting stuff, you hit escape. So that's a way to do it. Another way to do it, there's all these different ways to do the same stuff. So you could just type it in there, it would mark it right. But you can go in here where this content exists and cut it out of the formula bar, or copy it. And then when you go in here, you have to then, well, actually, I cut it right out. Yeah, so you didn't have to activate the formula bar then, but yeah, that's another way to do it. Is if you take stuff out of the formula bar, it doesn't take any formatting with it. So yeah, lots of ways to do stuff. Hide the grid lines. There are two different places you can do this. You can actually do that under the, I know there's a place you can do it here. So it's definitely under the View tab. Oh, it's under Page Layout too. Yeah, it's two different tabs. So we are going to leave the Home tab for the first time here in the case, and we're going to explore a couple other tabs. I have not saved once, by the way. I'm going to hit Control S on my keyboard. That is unacceptable. You should always be saving. And I'm going to go to the View tab, and I'm going to see here that I can uncheck the grid line box and they disappear. Knowing that the next step is on the Page Layout tab, I've done this case a couple times. I could have already gone here, cheated, not had to go to two different tabs. And where it says Grid Lines View, I can unhide them there. And the final step in the case is to change orientation from portrait to landscape, which is same as Word. Landscape. Save your file again. Now here's a trick, okay? Sam will accept your file regardless of whether or not you closed it. So it's really easy to forget to save the entire time. And then now you're like, oh, I'm done, sweet. And you go to the browser, you go back to the SAM submission page, you click here, you pick your file up, you will submit a blank file and get a 0, and then you've wasted a whole submission. So if you make it a rule for yourself, and I'm going to add that into my notes too there. I'm enhancing my slides as we go through here. Always be saving, and always be closing. Not in a sales way, but in a file way. Because if you close your file, it automatically prompts you to save whatever changes you haven't saved yet. So if you always close it, you save it. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because if you've made 2 copies of the file, which you're never supposed to do, and one's on your desktop with the correct name, and one's in the downloads with the correct name, and then you upload the one you never edited, you get no credit for that either. That's why you should always have 1 copy. Now, keep in mind, I deliberately misnamed my file. So when I go to the desktop and I grab it, it's pretty obvious that the file name isn't correct. I have had students sit there for 25 minutes and then email me, what do I do? This is what smartphones have done to our brain. It tells you right here what the file name's supposed to be. So if you can't figure out where the mistake in your file name is, I know where it is, but just copy the whole name and go in here and rename and paste right over top of that. Now mine had that thing in parentheses, and that's what happens on most computers when you save the same file in the same folder 2 times. Now I've fixed the name, and I can drag and drop it too. If you've got a couple monitors, that's the better way to do it. Now it took it. So it says everything's ready to go, but I haven't submitted yet. And now you have to hit submit. And as soon as you do, that's how long it takes to get your marks in SAM. Literally, your mark is done. If you submit on time every week, you know that this mark is going to be there ready to go for you. So now I go in here, I download the report. I can put it right into the same folder. I go in here, I open it up. You do not fix the report. You open the report to see what you did wrong, and then you go back to the original file and you fix that. So my report is going to have a mistake. And when I open it up, I'm going to see that, and it's going to tell me what I did wrong, and I'm going to go and fix it. What is the deal here? Just open. Okay, so I got a 98, almost 100. Now, I hate that I even have to ask this question, but if I give you the answers to get 100, and in addition to that, you get a report that tells you whether or not you got 100 and what you did wrong. And if I go down here, I see what I got wrong. And in addition to that, I can go to the sheet where the mistake is. There'll even be a comment right there. I had to click enable editing for all this to work, and it tells me something's wrong with this, right? So it doesn't tell me how to fix it, but once you stare at this long enough, you're going to start looking at all the variables. You're going to realize when you see that as a 19 and you go back to the step itself and it says 18, oh shoot, I dragged too far. I can fix that in about 2 seconds. You don't fix it in the graded file. I mean, you already know what you have to fix. You can even close this now, unless you have a bunch of mistakes. You know what you got to fix. So I close that up and I'm going to go back to the original file. And in the original file, I'm going to go to that step and I'm going to fix it. And then I submit the original file. You can submit your graded file too, but then you got to like delete the grade report sheet and get the file all cleaned up. It's annoying. So enable editing. Go here, fix my range. That should have been an 8, not a 9. D18, hit enter, hit save, close my file, go back to Sam, go here, submit the file again. You don't have to rename it again. Submit. Now you got your second grade summary report. Download it, open it up, and this will be 100%. So every week I will demonstrate the entire case, and starting in week 2, I won't have that 20 minutes of quiz prep and basic review in front of it. We just start the case, and you can sit there at the computer and do the whole case with me. See? Hundo P. All I want to see is 100% in here. People that aren't getting 100% clearly just have no idea what's going on in the course. It says it all over the place. You can submit twice. So you can't do this more than twice. It's just twice. And if you don't get it all the way to 100 and you're only in the 90s, you're probably still going to end up with an A+ anyway. Just, do the best you can. But I do allow the 2 submissions. And you don't have to save all those files. Once you submit files and you go to your activities, and you go to your activity list, again, keep ignoring the calendar, always ignore the calendar. You see the week 1 case has now disappeared from my activities because I used both submissions. But I can always go back and review my work under reports. And this grade, as long as it's submitted on time by Sunday night, you can still do it after, you just won't get credit. I would never take away your ability to still do the work. As long as it's done by Sunday night, the grade will go over to FOL when your professor transfers the marks, and you will always get the highest grade to go over. It just happens automatically. And that's it for the case. So there was something else I was going to remind you of. What the heck was it? I think it was just to remind you that you always want to submit them twice, and they do just disappear from your activity list once you submit them twice, but you can still get to them in reports. My brain is working on overload here. So next week, after you do the case, you will have a quiz to do as well to accompany it. This week, you just had the case, and your quiz to do was on FOL under FOL quizzes. So that is it for our first week 1 lecture. I hope you enjoyed all the extras that I layered over top of this very elementary case to show you that there's always more you can learn about an application like Excel. And when you go to get started next week, once again, you just get into the content, you go to the week 2 module, you get into the instructions and resources. It talks about what to do, what's going to be covered in the case. You go to SAM, you download the case, you're off to the races. And there'll be a separate video next week that talks about the quiz and how to use the training in the quiz to get the quiz done without losing what you've done. It's a pretty cool video. So that's what we've covered. Not the right window. Where am I here? An hour? Yeah, it'll be a little less than that, but we do cover a lot in the first case, and I want to point out to you all these reminders again. Always be saving, always be closing. Don't forget about your 1% extra credit. Get your updated MS Office. Don't forget, if I'm going too fast, pause, rewind me. These videos will be up the whole semester. They're not going anywhere. Enjoy this method of online learning, because you can literally be anywhere in the world and be doing this work. Just stop and get it done. It's completely asynchronous, and you will have your professor on FOL whenever you need that professor if you get stuck with anything. Some of them will be doing weekly help hours. It depends. They aren't required to do that because of the way this course is set up. So that is it for our week 1 lecture. I'll see you in week 2.